All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending this special event with us here at MIT Enterprise Forum. My name is Gen, and I'm the chapter chair for the New York chapter of the MIT Enterprise Forum. Before we get started, I would just want to spend a bit of time telling you about our chapter. We're a nonprofit with a focus on supporting the tech and entrepreneurship community here in New York and beyond. We have chapters around the world, including Cambridge, Bay Area, Florida, as well as around European countries as well. Um, and we regularly host workshops, expert panels, and fireside chats, such as this. We also have an annual membership. If you're interested, you can check it out from our website. After this event, next week we have a couple more events coming up. One on the Black Tech Leadership Panel and another one on the emerging trends in tech transformation in 2021. So be sure to check them out. We wanted to organize this event with Shleep because for me, as someone who works in the tech sector, I really appreciate the power of sleep for creativity and collaboration. I think it gets me into the mood to actually work with others instead of staying grumpy. So when Else reached out to me, I thought this would be a perfect event for our audience. So without further ado, let me introduce Else and Christina, and let me pass you guys the floor.
Cool. Thank you so much, gang, and really excited to be speaking today. I'll introduce myself in a second, but I'll first hand over the mic to Christina from my team to introduce herself.
Thanks, Els. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the session. So my name is Christina Gall. I am head of customer success at Shleep, and I have a double background in business and health. So I started out with 6 years in investment banking at JP Morgan in New York. And so this brings back fun memories. And then I actually did a master's in public health and epidemiology at the Harvard School of Public Health. So I kind of switched gears towards the health world, which is my passion. And now at Shleep, I get to combine these two things. So I'm super happy to be here with you all today.
Great. Thank you, Christina. So let me share my screen.
And maybe while Els is sharing, I will also mention that you can put your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom, and we will address them either throughout the session or if not at the end.
Yes. Thank you for that. I will also quickly introduce myself, so a little bit more about me. I am the sleep geek of our team. So I read a book in high school that really, really fascinated me, written by Professor Bill Dement from Stanford. And he talks in the book about the taboo that there is on sleep. We associate it with being lazy. You can sleep when you're dead. Well, actually, it's one of the most fundamental things in our life. That was more than 20 years ago, and I really kind of crafted my path after that book. There's no study of sleep, so I ended up studying clinical neuropsychology as well as neurosciences, then went on to do research here in the Netherlands, then at Harvard, and then at UC Berkeley during my PhD. And I looked at sleep in kind of the healthy situation, but also when we have trouble sleeping and what impact that has on our mental health, performance, cognition, etc. Then I made a complete switch, as you can see, joined the business world, worked at McKinsey, realized how little people in the business world know about the importance of sleep or prioritize sleep. So I figured that should really change. I started to give workshops within McKinsey, kind of for fun in the beginning for colleagues to, shake them up and tell them, we need to sleep. But then that really grew out of hand, and I ended up doing that all over the world. And after about 3 years, I said, you know what, this is actually all I want to do. So I left McKinsey, founded Shleep, and I'm also adjunct professor at IE Business School. And then a note to New York, I actually also lived there temporarily because with Shleep, we went through the accelerator Angel Pad located in New York. It was very cold. It was in the middle of winter. Anyway, what do we do? So we help organizations, all sorts of organizations, really, all over the world. Indeed, as Christina said, we would love to hear what your questions are. So please use the Q&A function that you can see at the bottom of the screen. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Now, normally it's mostly questions about sleep. If there's any questions today about, the entrepreneurial path, of course, also happy to answer those questions. Okay, so then the agenda for today, I want to start off with zooming in on COVID-19 because it's a little bit weird hosting sessions like this and not kind of mentioning the elephant in the room that is impacting all of us, including our sleep. Then I want to give you a bit of an intro in, why do we sleep? We'll do a sleep debt exercise so that you can figure out what your current sleep debt is. We'll close off with a little bit more on how to improve your sleep. And I hope you can make it until the end because we'll give away actually a promo code just to the people attending today for an upcoming program that we have. Okay, so COVID-19, elephant in the room. I want to start with launching the poll. Christina, maybe you can already start it. So I'd love for you to vote in the poll. And then if you can, also share a little bit more of context in the chat.
I think one thing is that it looks like the polls are combined. So our first poll and also our other polls are in there. So I think.
I see.
Yeah, they would have to answer all of them. So maybe, which obviously the sleep that comes later.
Yeah, the sleep that I still have to explain. Can we see if we can just have people respond to the first question?
Yeah, let's see if maybe people can try that, and then we can see. Yeah.
That would be great.
Okay, response is coming in.
Great. Thanks, all of you. And by the way, since we have a bit of a smaller group today, at least compared to some of the workshops we do or webinars, definitely also feel free, to use the chat today. Christina is obviously monitoring that a bit better than me, but just wanted to throw it out there that we can, have it be a bit more interactive.
Okay, so we'll give it a few more seconds and then we'll end the polling.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see what we're seeing here. You can already see it yourself as well. So what have been the main challenges for you? Lots of you saying not enough exercise, actually more than half. And then coming in at number 2 is cannot fall asleep, stay asleep, and working too much, can't disconnect from work. I would say that's pretty comparable to other groups that we've seen. Where these really tend to be the top ones. Sometimes actually the anxious, moody, cranky one is a bit more popular, so to speak. But indeed, so I'll quickly touch upon how all these things are really interrelated, including our exercise and our sleep, and our sleep and our exercise.
And else, maybe since people did vote for the second, maybe we can just quickly share those as well, so that we don't do it later.
Yeah, except that I just clicked away my poll results. 1 second.
Oh,
okay. I
still have them. Yeah, okay.
Okay, I found them. So indeed, great. You already answered how does the lack of sleep impact you? And what do we see? Well, actually 3 sharing the number 1, feeling less energetic and alert, attention and focus being worse. Those are always at the top, always. But in this group also being less productive, kind of being shared up there. And not so much being clumsier or making poor decisions. Great. And then what have we seen in the chat, or did anyone share in the chat?
No, but someone is sharing now. Yeah. Oh, sharing about issues. Yeah, we'll discuss issues and questions a bit later. The other interesting thing for those of you who did answer the sleep debt, even though we haven't gone to the calculation yet, but it's interesting that you've estimated it, so you can see if you are right once we get to the calculation later on.
Exactly. And maybe we can relaunch it actually when we get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why are we starting with kind of the elephant in the room? Because you see that a lot of people obviously are impacted by COVID-19, and also in terms of their sleep. So there's different studies floating around, but a lot of them kind of see similar results in that about a third of people say they have worse quality sleep ever since Corona. A little bit more saying they now get less total sleep. Of course, also some people actually getting better sleep because their commute is gone or their jet lag is gone because they don't have to travel so much. But this whole working from home, you know, kind of being on 24/7, like I saw with you guys, not being able to disconnect from work, has this direct, you know, impact on how much we sleep and our sleep quality. This then also impacts other things. And one I want to point out is that we also see that anxiety has really increased. And of course, there's a lot of talk about mental health, but thought I would really also share this, that, you know, if you are noticing this, then you're not alone. And we know from many studies already pre-corona that when sleep is affected, we're actually very likely to see impact elsewhere. So thank you for sharing. And I wanted to also just quickly start off by saying how important sleep is, not just generally, but particularly right now in this pandemic. And why is that? Well, we know that sleep improves health in general, but specifically, we also know that sleep can help prevent infection. I'm not going to say that if you get amazing sleep, you won't get corona. There is, however, some early data that perhaps those people who sleep better have slightly lower rates of getting infection, but that science is definitely too early to really say anything definitive. But we definitely know from lots of research before corona, both viral as well as bacterial infections, that when we have poor sleep, our immune system suffers and we are definitely much more likely to get infections. So not enough data yet on corona, but we know in general this is the case. Also, when you have corona, you of course want to prevent any other infection kind of happening at the same time. So definitely want to prioritize sleep now, and also if you get it. And then just secondly, overall, we know that sleep leads to better and faster recovery from any type of illness. And finally, if you haven't gotten your vaccine yet, then definitely make sure that you kind of plan ahead once you do have your appointments to get good sleep before your vaccination and good sleep after, because we know that your immune system will make many more antibodies in response to the vaccination with good sleep. So incredibly important. Finally, we also know that sleep really boosts stress resilience, which, you know, of course, we all kind of have much more of now. And another reason, despite all the challenges, to actually try harder on getting that sleep that we need. And of course, we'll speak more about how to do that today. So then a little bit more about back to the basics of why we actually sleep in the first place, and why do we say it's so fundamental, or why did Bill Dement say that in his book already more than 20 years ago? So when you kind of look at, you know, this adapted pyramid of performance and well-being, and what is all kind of needed, what are all the different factors impacting it? Of course, there's a ton of different factors, and your personal pyramid might look slightly different than this one. But why do we put sleep really as the foundational block there? Well, that's really because of the impact that it has on all the other factors, making it so fundamental. So to just give you a few quick examples, if you sleep 1 hour shorter than you're used to, on average, people eat 140 calories more the next day, but they also crave sugars much more. Their insulin response looks more like a pre-diabetic. So all these things that happen around nutrition are actually really, really hard to kind of change into a positive swing when you are tired. So if you're thinking about eating healthier or losing weight, sleep is actually incredibly important. We know that it has this direct impact on our hormones that also control our hunger. So the hormone that makes you feel full goes down, leptin, and the hormone that makes you feel hungry, ghrelin, goes up with sleep deprivation. Also kind of explaining why you see a higher calorie intake. And the same thing we see with sleep. So we know that when we've had poor sleep, people are less likely to exercise. When they exercise, it's less intensely, and they're more likely to get injured when they exercise. But of course, it also works the other way around, that when we have exercise during the day, we see that this can really improve our sleep. As long as the window between exercise and sleep is long enough, because you don't want to exercise right before sleep, because then it can really negatively impact your sleep quality. And then stress and sleep, which I'll get to in a second, kind of share this bi-directional relationship. We just had a webinar on relationships for Valentine's Day, where we discussed this bi-directional relationship between love and belonging and sleep, and the other way around. So lots of connections here, making sleep such a good target to start to target when you want to change your performance and well-being. So I can skip this poll because you guys already shared it, and thank you. But now I want to explain a little bit why we see all these different impacts of a lack of sleep, because it's very wide ranging, and how could it possibly be that this one thing impacts so many downstream things in our body and our brain? So I'll explain kind of two basic functions of sleep to you that kind of explain a big portion of this. So the first one is the impact that sleep has on our brain and the critical function that it plays there. And you kind of see this little shower head here, because it turns out that sleep cleans our brain. And you maybe didn't know that it needed cleaning in the first place. I definitely didn't know this until some of the studies came out for the first time in 2013. So it's not that old. It's not that long that we've known this. But it turns out that when our brain cells, our neurons are active during the day, they produce toxic byproducts. So those increase during the day. And they found out that they actually decrease after a night of sleep, and particularly during deep sleep. And the process behind that is very much dependent on fluid. So when we are asleep, we have these fluid-filled areas in our brain that become larger, that can reach more parts of the brain. And it's almost like they're kind of, moving in and flushing through our brain, clearing out these toxins into our lymphatic system. Hence this nice depiction with the shower head. And we know that after it's been cleaned, the neurons function much better. So they can communicate better, they're more accurate, they can process things faster. And that really explains a ton of things that we see after a poor night of sleep, not just attention and focus like we saw with you, but it's really much broader. Then the second critical function of sleep is to keep our brain emotionally balanced. And what do I mean with that? Well, the emotional center of our brain, the amygdala, we have one on the left and one on the right, kind of this almond-shaped structure. Of course, it's connected to a ton of other areas in our brain, including the prefrontal cortex, the PFC, and particularly the medial prefrontal cortex, so a bit more in the middle. And this area is basically an inhibitory and regulatory force over this emotional center. So when something really intense is happening, and in Amsterdam, I always give the example, you're biking to the office, or you're biking somewhere, maybe not the office anymore, and a car almost hits you. How do you respond in that moment? Do you, lash out? Do you yell something at the driver? Can you actually take a deep breath, count to 10, and then think, you know what? I've done that too. They're just distracted. It's fine. I'm fine. That is very much dependent on this connection being intact. So this is how it works, but this is really how it works with sleep. Without sleep, we see a different brain. And that's because some parts of our brain take what we call these micro sleeps, where they go offline and they don't function very well. And we see this in many different brain areas after poor sleep, but definitely also in the medial prefrontal cortex. And then we lose this inhibition, which really leads to this overactive emotional brain. And as my PhD advisor always called it, all gas and no brakes. He is Matt Walker, the author of Why We Sleep, in case you read the book. So how does that then kind of intertwine with our daily lives? How kind of all of this works? So for a lot of people, their stress levels tend to increase during the day. And you also see this if you look at amygdala reactivity. So I've done this myself in my own PhD studies. We would have someone be in the scanner in the morning and in the evening and look at how reactive is the amygdala when something kind of intense is happening.
Else, we have a quick question about the brain cleaning. So
yeah.
Someone is asking, how badly is the sleep cleaning process impacted by getting up to use the restroom every 3 hours or so, as is typical for many men over 65?
Right. So it shouldn't be impacted too much because so the deep sleep is really important for this. And we don't really tend to wake up naturally out of deep sleep. And also because we call it deep sleep, it's the stage in which it's really the hardest to wake up out of. And we have most of this deep sleep in the first half of the night. So most times when someone needs to use the bathroom at night, you will have passed kind of that first deep sleep. So waking up at night is very natural and not necessarily a problem, as long as you can, fall back asleep relatively quickly. Yeah, so I hope that's reassuring. Yes, so stress levels increase during the day. And then when we don't manage to get them down and we go to bed at night, we know that then really leads to disrupted and lighter sleep. So this can be waking up multiple times or having a harder time falling asleep, waking up too early, or just overall having light sleep and waking up tired. And this then subsequently has a big impact on how we wake up in terms of mood. Whereas when we do manage to, basically manage our stress levels, as in proactively deal with it and having coping mechanisms there, we see that this leads to much higher quality sleep and that we then also wake up in a better mood. And with poor mood or bad mood, I'm not just talking about mood as in, how happy you are, how depressed you are, but also how anxious are you. And these kind of two fundamental functions of sleep explain a ton of what we see in research. So there's unfortunately no time to go into this today, but you see impact on different types of IQ, you see impact on EQ, basically all these things that you really need on a daily basis, interacting at work or at home with your loved ones and your friends and family. You really want all of these, faculties to work properly. And even though you might not notice, all of these are impacted. So to say a little bit more about, kind of how much sleep loss is too much, there was one really milestone study taking place in 2003 in the US, actually, and despite this very Dutch name of the first author, who is also Dutch. And what they did in the study was just really well looking at, what is roughly then too much. But they did this really well by having people in the study for 14 days, which is a really big ask in sleep studies because keeping people in your lab is highly intensive, as you can imagine. And they looked at their performance through lapses. So they did a cognitive task, and a lapse really meant that they missed something in this task, meaning that the higher the score here, actually the worse the performance. They had 4 different groups. The first group, these poor guys and girls, got 0 sleep. And then there's 4, 6, or 8 hours per night. So to start with the worst group, very quickly, as you probably expect, a horrible performance and really maxing out. And they only had to be in the study, luckily for them, for just 3 nights. Also because it's quite unethical to sleep deprive anyone any longer than that. Of course, also a bit unrealistic, right? I mean, I don't know, last time you skipped an entire night, let alone 2 or 3. But still interesting, obviously, from a scientific standpoint. So what if you get 4 hours of sleep a night? Much more realistic. You see, you do a lot better, but over time, you're ending up in the same danger zone, actually. 6 hours, probably the most realistic. At least we know from studies that about 1/3 of Americans is getting only 6 or less. And again, doing much better, but you see that actually over time, the performance is as bad as someone who skips an entire night of sleep. So it adds up, obviously. Then what about 8 hours? So 8 hours, by far the best group, but we do see decline in performance here. And then you might wonder, well, why is that? Is this task just getting really, really boring, or what's going on? So what's going on here is that these 4, 6, and 8 are hours spent in bed, not hours spent asleep. And this is a really important distinction because most people obviously don't go to bed and fall asleep within a second and sleep right through until the end. If you are one of those people, you are definitely sleep deprived. So you're not getting that much. And in this group, they were getting about 7.5 hours on average per night. On average, people need about 8 hours of sleep. So this tiny little difference between what they need on average and what they're getting was already leading to performance decrements across these 14 days. Now, what was also really interesting about the study, take-home messages, 1 bad night of sleep actually isn't that bad. You see that here, unless you get 0 hours of sleep, basically as long as you get at least 4 hours of sleep, this 1 night, is not going to kill you in terms of your performance. You'll be quite fine. But it's really the accumulated effects that count. And then what I want to say is that what's really interesting is that they asked these 2 groups of 4 and 6 hours who at the end of the 14 days are performing horribly. They asked them, how do you think you're doing? And how are you feeling? And they said, oh, actually, I think I'm fine, which really goes to show this disconnect between our objective performance, which they weren't aware of, and our subjective feeling. And I think this is why sleep deprivation is so widespread, because we don't have that connection anymore. We don't have that self-insight anymore, particularly not when we're chronically sleep deprived, because we just kind of forget what it even feels like to be well rested. And the parts of our brain, responsible for this self-insight aren't functioning as well anymore. But how can that be possible, right? That they at least didn't feel super sleepy. So stress can really mask your sleepiness, as we say, and particularly in a crisis. So, I don't think we can call Corona, we could still call it a crisis, but it's now been like a year. But of course, in the beginning, there was quite some adrenaline and cortisol going on. So hormones that we really release in response to a stressor that are meant for a quick sprint, literally a quick sprint, to just run away from the bear around the corner or the lion or whatever is gonna, catch us back in the day. And then we really need to recover and we need to rest, and these hormones need to decline. However, in kind of the modern world, we don't need to run away from a lion or a bear most of the time when we are probably 99% or 100% of the time. But these hormones our brain still functions this way. And these hormones are still being released, and they're not being released for a short amount of time, but they're basically more chronically released, which then has all of these downstream effects on how we function, and also, of course, on our sleep, because we're not actually sleepy thanks to these hormones, despite us needing that sleep, very, very deeply. Okay, So since stress is such a bad thing for our sleep, and we really don't take enough time to relax, I want to just do a quick relaxation with you guys. So if you could stand up, if you're seated, just follow along with me and really kind of do as in this picture. So hands up, deep breath in and out. Okay, second one. And lean back a bit. Out. And last one, deep breath in. And out. And even better, I think, to close your eyes. And maybe you kind of feel now that this deep breathing can very quickly lower your heart rate and help your body relax. And this is really one of the things I want to push you on, is to think, what are really small steps that you could take to improve your sleep? And anything that you can do to decrease stress will improve your sleep. Okay, so then on to the sleep debt exercise. And I want you to calculate it. So quite simple. You first answer these two questions. First one is, how many hours of sleep do you get on a weeknight? Rough average here is fine. Secondly, how many hours of sleep do you need to feel well rested throughout the day? Now, this tends to be a much more complicated question for people to ask. And it's also probably the most frequently asked question: how many hours of sleep do I need? So let me dive into that one in a little bit more detail. So first of all, I want to show you what it looks like in the population in terms of sleep need. So how many hours of sleep do most people need? I already told you the average is about 8 hours, but as you can see from this graph, most people need about 7 to 9 hours. And yes, there are exceptions, but that is very rare. If you, for instance, look at, how many people really need less than 6 hours, the estimates range a little bit, but it's somewhere from 0.3 to about 1%. So it's really very rare to only need that much. Where you land on this curve is really genetically determined. So it's not because of ambition, because of training, or dedication or anything like that. You're just born with whatever number you need, and you're just kind of stuck with that. I mean, not as in born when you're a baby, you obviously need much more, but I mean the number of sleep need that you need after about 25 years old, where we all kind of stabilize. So that still doesn't tell you how much sleep you need, but I can tell you that if you've had enough sleep, you can sit through anything boring without getting sleepy. That's sometimes a bit of a surprise to people. Secondly, if you get enough sleep, you wake up without an alarm. So these are really two good tests to figure out, am I actually really getting enough sleep? And then the best test is when you have a vacation. Now, I know that a true vacation has been a really long time, probably for most of you. So maybe think back of an earlier vacation. And this is a really relaxing vacation. So there's no kids on this vacation. There's no alarm clocks. And I don't want you to think about the first couple of nights, but a little bit later into this vacation, because usually we go on vacation with the sleep debt and we sleep much more the first night, but somewhere you're gonna level off. So where you really wake up naturally without an alarm. And the question is, how much would you sleep then, or did you sleep then? So when there's no constraints, no commitments, you can decide whatever time you want to go to bed. There's no alarm. How much would you sleep then? Not the first nights, but where would you level off? Because that's your answer for B. And now I want you to calculate your Friday morning sleep debt, and I'll ask you to submit it in the poll. Or actually, since we're not with a big group, let's actually just use the chat, if that's okay with everyone. So your Friday morning sleep debt is 5 times A minus 5 times B. And I'm saying minus here, which is really important because it's basically a negative number. Maybe it's 0, which would be amazing. Otherwise, it's a negative number. So 5 times A minus 5 times B. Please just enter it in the chat. I'll just open up the chat right now to see what your sleep debt is. And if there's any questions, feel free to ask. Okay, we got the first one. Michael, a 5. Okay, is that you, gang, with your 10? Okay, Gordon, 7. Lena, 5. Nina, 1. Now we're talking. That's doing, Nina's doing very well. So B is how many hours do you sleep during the day? No. So A is how many hours do you get on a weeknight? If you also sleep during the day, you need to add it to B. Sorry, you need to add it to A. So A is your total sleep in 24 hours on average. And B is how many hours do you need to really feel well rested? I hope that answers your question, Faith. Okay, William, 1, also doing well. Becca, 10. Michael, 10. Okay, Peter, I typically sleep 5 to 6 hours and wake up without an alarm, but I feel I need 7 to feel well rested. Oof. Okay, yes, then indeed your sleep debt is about 7.5 hours. And you're making a really good point. I should have made that earlier. Just because you wake up without an alarm doesn't mean you've had enough sleep. It's just only the other way around. That if you need the alarm, you're definitely not getting enough sleep, if that makes sense. Okay, so then Faith is at 10, and we've got Ymir at 2.5. Yeah, okay, I get it. 7 hours of sleep debt from Gordon. Anastasia at 10. Wow. So we have, I would say, just 2 people with 1, and then the rest of you have 5 or more. Sorry, one with 2.5, and the rest really 5 or more. And then it's also with melatonin, not good quality. Okay, we definitely need to get to the last part for Faith here. First of all, thank you all for sharing your sleep debt. And you might be wondering, what does that number even mean? So let me say a little bit more about that. So we know from studies where they looked at sleep debt and how it impacts us, that when we have a sleep debt of 8 hours, and some of you are really just around that this impacts us on both cognitive as well as motor tasks. And then we perform similarly to someone who has a blood alcohol level of 0.1%. And to put that in perspective, that's like 3.5 glasses of alcohol. So you're legally drunk. You're not even allowed to get into your car anymore, except that, now it's caused by sleep debt, but it really has very much of kind of the same impact. So that at least gives you a little bit of a ballpark anchor of what these hours mean. So you might wonder, I've got like 1,000 hours of sleep debt, can I ever catch up, and what am I supposed to do? Well, first of all, can you catch up? The answer is kind of yes and no. So let me start with the negative part, the no. We think that if you build up your sleep debt, try to pay it off, build it up, try to pay it off, etc., that this does have long-term health consequences. And that's because we actually can't fully repay the sleep debt. I don't know if you ever tried, but if you skip an entire night of sleep, there's no way you can catch up on those, 8 hours on average. Or if you lose 1 hour of sleep, it's really hard to kind of pay back that amount one-to-one. So you see that people pay about half, about a third back. And if you think back about our brains being cleaned, we're basically losing out on cleaning time. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to catch up as much as you can. You really, really should. Because that's really the only way to get back to baseline in terms of performance, immune system, memory, the whole shebang. So then how? Well, you might be inclined to go and sleep in. We don't want you to do that. Instead, we recommend that you go to bed earlier. So this is much more impactful in you getting basically better quality sleep and catching up, or taking naps. And if there's time in the end, I can say a little bit more about naps. So these are basically like the best ways to catch up on this lost sleep if you have a really high sleep debt, and some of you definitely do. Okay, but then what are some other ways to improve sleep, including how can you improve your sleep quality, which is just as important, if not more important, than your sleep amount. Now here I really want to push you to take a small step, right? What's really realistic, instead of thinking, okay, I'm going to change like 10 things now, just pick one thing to change. And I'd love it if you want to share in the chat, what is the particular thing that you would like to change about your sleep? Is it duration? Is it quality? And then, can you be more specific? Is it time for you that it takes to fall asleep? Is it time that you lie awake in the middle of the night? How you feel when you wake up? Feel free to share that in the chat. That would be good to see. Let's see, we have some coming in. Falling back to sleep after waking up in the middle of the night, and both duration and quality. Okay, so let me say a little bit more about that. Going to bed earlier, yeah. Going to bed earlier, also common. So one of the things, if you want to get better quality or fall asleep faster, then it's really recommended that you really invest a bit of time in thinking about what is a good way for me to relax? What is a good way for me to decrease stress? And there's a ton of different ways, and it's not one size fits all because everyone relaxes with something different. So I just want to give you some inspiration of, different approaches. So it might be meditation that works for you, but maybe it's something completely different. Maybe you're more into music or sleep hypnosis or sleep sounds. All of these really have been scientifically proven to help you get better sleep. So it's really about finding what works for you and how you can create that into a habit. And of course, having easy access. So I actually want to do a quick meditation exercise with you right now. Let me just check. Yeah, we have time. I'm going to sit down for it, but I'd love if you just go along with it. Sorry if there's any background noise. I just heard an ambulance go by, but it should be okay. Okay, here we go.
This is a short 1-minute exercise that can be used to relax and refocus. It can be done anywhere, whether you're at home, on the train, or in your office. Sit with your feet planted firmly on the ground. Straighten your back and neck, but avoid clenching your muscles. Rest your hands on your knees, with your palms facing towards the ceiling. During the minute, focus your thoughts on your breath. Focus on how your body feels as the breath flows in and out of your body. One of the first things you'll quickly learn when trying this exercise is just how easily distracted the mind can be, even in the space of a minute. That's completely normal, and it doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. If you notice this happening, acknowledge your thoughts, and then gently remind yourself to focus on your breathing once again. Okay, let's start. First, close your eyes and become mindful of your breathing. I will ring a bell at the start and at the end of the minute. Slowly come back to here and now. You can wiggle your toes and fingers for some energy. Slowly open your eyes when you're ready. Take a brief moment to notice how you feel right now.
All right. I would love if you could share in the chat how that was. Okay, so you can just type one word in the chat if you're still with us, if you didn't fall asleep just now. Okay, great. Thank you, Lena. Yep, mind wandered. Makes sense. So it's always funny, like some people find it kind of like super sleepy and like I could take a nap right now, whereas people like Nina say, oh, actually, it's really refreshing. Sometimes it also depends on the time of day of, you know, when you actually take this break. But why I like this so much is that it's just really short. And I think you can notice how quickly, you know, in some cases, you can really get sleepy in such a short amount of time. So that's really something to think about, not just for you to fall asleep faster, but really something to actually practice more also during the day. And congrats, because basically you took your first step towards better sleep tonight. And this is, so I didn't say much yet about what we do with Shleep, but we work with organizations all over the world. We host monthly webinars, things like that. And we also have our own sleep coaching app, and this is one of the exercises in there. And why I'm focusing so much on short exercises is that we really want you to build in these moments during the day to get this curve down so that you have deeper and more restorative sleep, whatever it is for you, right? It can also be a 10-minute walk outside during the day, which is, again, it's kind of has two bonuses, that you get exercise, but also that you get bright light, which really helps, again, with your sleep. And then, because we usually get questions about this, just very briefly, a little bit about substances, because when you think about sleep quality, you really kind of just need to do a quick check on these. So this is about, for instance, caffeine intake. Lots of people know they shouldn't be drinking right before they go to bed, but this window should actually be quite long because of this very long half-life that caffeine has. And as we age, this half-life can also become longer for us. So on average, it's about 4 to 7 hours half-life, right? So it stays in our body much, much longer and can lead to also more awakenings at night, or longer awakenings at night. And then alcohol or having a heavy meal, neither of those is very good for getting good sleep. And if you do have them, then make sure you have at least a window of 3 hours before these and your bedtime. And if you happen to smoke, then again, you want to leave time between your last cigarette and going to bed in about 2 hours max. It has a shorter half-life than caffeine. All right. So what do I want to leave you with? A few last tips. Maybe you want to kind of, think about your commitment and say, okay, I'm really now going to have no more caffeine 8 hours before bed. Maybe you want to have a different commitment, which I really like. This one is to really focus to start with your Sunday nights. Quite some people have trouble falling asleep on Sunday night more than any other night of the week. And what can really help there is to schedule some unplugged chill time. So I really love this thing on the right from social media where, yeah, I think a lot of our evenings look like this, especially with our smartphones. But we really should be deep unplugging. I don't say depugging, but detoxing, unplugging, and yeah, have it be a little bit boring. Guess what? That really helps to have better sleep. And finally, to catch up on that sleep, maybe you want to start with a bit of a power nap. A power nap is really max 20 minutes so that you don't get into the deep stages of sleep and you'll wake up much more refreshed than when you take a longer nap. Then final thing I wanted to point out is that, and by the way, we will also share a handout with all of you, is that we're launching a 30-day Sleep Better program now, not just for the corporates that we usually work with, but this one will be accessible for anybody. It starts mid-March around World Sleep Day. So if you feel like you or someone else that you know really could use some help when it comes to their sleep, they can join our program. And as promised, you all get a promo code. So the usual price is 249 euros. But with this promo code, you as attendees will get it for just 99 euros. So that is kicking off in less than 4 weeks from the top of my head. So you can scan this code to get to the website, or you can use the link below. So then some summary points. First of all, sleep is really the foundation to our well-being and deserves all of our attention. And sleep can also really be an anchor in stressful times, given with what everybody has been dealing with in the last 12 months. It can be a good reminder. And then join our upcoming program if you want to get more support, which also includes access to our app. Then let me finalize by saying thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Christina, if you want to shoot them over to me, we have some time left, I think. Yeah.
Yep.
8 minutes.
Yep. So we had one question back to the sleep need and sleep debt. What about cumulative sleep throughout the day? For example, if you get 5 hours at night and then another 2 hours naps during the day, are you as effective as if you slept 7 hours at night in total?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm trying to think if I know of studies. I don't know if studies really like literally comparing that head to head, but I would say it's recommended to have your sleep as consolidated as possible across the night, especially in this example, because with just those 5 hours at night, it is expected that until you've taken your nap, your performance will be quite poor. And because most people have their kind of their nap in their afternoon dip, which is pretty soon after lunch, that's a pretty long time, to kind of be waiting around for those 2 hours and not being, fully functioning. So naps can definitely be a performance enhancer, but it's more like an add-on or a rescue after a poor night of sleep, right? I mean, it's not always within your control. I have 2 little kids. They sometimes really mess up my sleep. And then, kind of the only option is to take that nap to get back to baseline. But I wouldn't say, oh yeah, cut up your night into shorter night and then add a nap consistently. And if you have to choose, then I'd rather have you have like a 6.5 hour night and like a 20-minute power nap in the afternoon, so that the rest of the day or the morning you're really much more balanced.
Great. So next we had quite a few questions from people who would like to go to sleep earlier. So maybe some night owls. And then we had the opposite. Someone actually falls asleep early, but they would like to be able to stay up longer and sleep longer.
Yeah, so this has got everything to do with your chronotype. So you've got 3 types. You've got the morning, the evening, kind of middle of the road. Most people are actually middle of the road. So I'm actually a morning type. Christina is an evening type. And a big, and this is genetically determined. So it's not really something you can change, but what can help is to use some tools to change your rhythm. So ideally you can sleep at, your circadian best time. And by the way, if you want to find out, in our 30-day program, you will find out your own chronotype and how that affects you also during the day. But one tool is light. So bright light works on our biological clock and can move your rhythm a bit. So it's not going to change, obviously, your genetics, but it can change the timing, for instance, when you release melatonin. to be earlier or to be later. So let's give the example of me. I'm a morning type. Let's say I want to, stay up longer and sleep a bit later. Then I should really get this bright light later in the day. So, late afternoon, early evening. And exercising at that time is also a very powerful way to shift your rhythm. Whereas Christina is very strong evening type. And maybe you have your lamp by you, but
I do, yeah.
yeah.
So
yeah, you go ahead, Christina.
okay. So you see this very, very bright, it's actually called a sunlight lamp. So it's used also for people that get seasonal affective depression in the winter, because it's much stronger than your regular indoor lighting. That's not really enough. So you need either to go outside in the morning. So that goes back to the circadian rhythm. You need the morning light to really help attune your rhythm. And for us evening owls, night owls, it can make us a bit earlier if we get that bright light in the morning. So either go outside in the sun, or you can use a lamp like this. But the sun works much better. So if you can go outside, I'm just moved to a really sunny place, Biarritz in the southwest of France, and I already feel the intensity of the sun, because smaller buildings. So I get a lot more sunlight than I would in a big city, and I already feel actually that it's making me sleep deeper at night and get sleepy a bit earlier than usual. So yeah, it's very, very effective. It's like when you go camping and you're outside a lot and you get the full sun instead of just a little bit of sun. So,
yeah. There's actually been studies where they sent people camping and they noticed that they went to bed 2 hours earlier than their normal bedtime. And of course, they're not like doing work behind their laptop either, but it's super, super powerful. So if you are one of those people who wants to go to bed earlier, use the power of light. So that means getting it in the morning, but also avoiding it in the evening. Because that was the other thing, of course, with camping, that they didn't have any artificial light with them. And then your body will produce melatonin earlier and you can shift your rhythm earlier. Okay.
Someone asked about strong evening type. Yeah, that means you get sleepy only very late at night. So like after midnight or even later, after 1. Okay, then some other people are asking a related question: how to train yourself to sleep at the same time every night.
Yeah, this is a little bit of the chicken and the egg, because it's very much, once you start doing it, your body will be much more used to you having this 24-hour rhythm. So the big question here is, what will be the trigger for you to start doing this? And what I would recommend is that your morning wake up time is actually slightly more important than your evening bedtime in terms of keeping your rhythm. I'm not saying in terms of sleep quality or anything like that. So if you want to start somewhere, I would say pick a wake up time that you feel is really good for you consistently. And then first try to keep that consistent with, like, I don't know, a max 1 hour switch if you have to switch, or for instance on the weekend, but preferably you really keep it at that one time. And then you'll see that you'll get into a regular rhythm more easily. And of course, it's also all about anchors, right? Reminders that kind of prompt you to, oh yeah, I need to get ready for bed. So in our app, for instance, you can set a reminder for that timing, but of course there's other things you can do. And building a routine where you always do the same things, kind of triggered by the same time. Yeah, I can speak much more about this, but want to make sure that if there's any other questions, we can still get to them.
Yep, we've actually just gotten a slew of them in the Q&A. There's a question about melatonin. For that, I will post the link to our sleep supplements article that is on our website that I wrote. But short answer is we don't recommend melatonin, but there are other sleep supplements you can use every now and then to help you sleep better. Next question is that there was the hypothesis that before artificial light, we would sleep. It was normal to sleep in 4-hour increments, wake up in the middle of the night, do something, and then go back to sleep for another 4 hours. And then they posted a link to,
Yeah, so I would say the science is a little bit mixed on that. I mean, the science is there that people did that. I'm not questioning that. What is, however, unclear is whether that was ever actually beneficial to us humans, or whether somehow we are biologically programmed to sleep in these two as segments, or maybe only some of us are programmed to sleep like that, or no one is programmed to sleep like that. We just happen to do it. The kind of the short answer is we've found nothing yet biologically to say, oh, this is better to sleep in those slots, or for some people it is better. So I know that there's like this one researcher kind of, doing a lot of almost marketing for this. And of course, it's very reassuring if you wake up in the middle of the night to think, hey, maybe this isn't actually so bad because we used to do this in the day, etc. But it's definitely not a rhythm I would start promoting you to adopt, or anything like that. It definitely goes to show that sleeping in those two slots, some people apparently did that for quite a long time, but we don't really know what the impact is of that. Definitely also not long term. So I wouldn't recommend it. I would still go for the kind of consolidated night of sleep. And then when it hasn't been a good night of sleep, you can add a nap. And yeah, of course, it sometimes happens that you wake up in the middle of the night and it takes a long time to fall back asleep. But then I would say there's other things to try out before giving up and just kind of adjusting to these two time periods.
And I would add that I believe there were a couple of sleep studies on hunter-gatherer tribes a few years ago in Africa, I think. And I think they did not really see that they were sleeping in this pattern. So even though they didn't have artificial light, they were sleeping the whole night. Of course, the timing varies. So some of them were sleeping earlier and others later, but they didn't see this pattern of waking up after 4 hours and then going back to bed. So it could be that, not everyone did it.
Exactly.
Okay, so it looks like we are over time now. So there were, I think we answered almost all the questions, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, if there's anything remaining, feel free to reach out to us or sign up in our 30-day program. Thanks for joining. Gang, I don't know if you wanted to close off. Definitely thank you again for having us and hosting us. It was really fun to see you all and see the questions and the sleep debt.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.